Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of FECG TV, which stands for the Fisher Educational Consulting Group YouTube television channel. If you're new and this is your first time joining us, let me tell you a little bit about our channel. Our channel is designed to lift up the voices of educators who are traditionally underrepresented or unheard, specifically women and women of color. We invite these guests who are experts in their field to talk about contemporary topics in education from a unique, equitable perspective. We bring some of the best and brightest to this channel. So if they make it here, you should listen to what they have to say. Today, we have special guest, Mrs. Tareia Caldwell, and she has graciously agreed to join us the day before Mother's Day. So I'm going to try to make sure that we finish quickly so we can get her onto her next part of her day. But she is here to talk about a very relevant and specific topic of turnaround education, um, specifically private consulting. A lot of school districts are finding out that they don't have the resources intrinsically or internally within their buildings. So they're having to reach out to private consultants to get their kids what they need. So today we have Mrs. Caldwell, who is a turnaround expert, former administrator, teacher, all those things. So she really knows the topic from the inside out at every level. And she's going to share with us some initial information to kind of get you on your pathway. And then at the end, she'll share some contact information if you need to go deeper. So without further delay, let's go ahead and meet our guest. How are you doing, Mrs. Caldwell?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for the invitation today.
No, thank you. Thank you. You are the talent. So we are thankful to have you here.
Thank you.
Yep. So I know I went over this off screen with you, but
Mhm.
for those of you that are new, the format is our interviews last anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, and we ask our guests 8 questions that we have surveyed or solicited from educators around the country. So, with that being said, are you ready to start, Mrs. Caldwell?
I'm ready. I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, here we go. So, first question, very easy. Tell us about you professionally and personally.
Okay. Well, my name is Tareia Caldwell. I am the Director of Educational Impact Services for GPS Solutions, and we're located out of Farmington Hills and out of Southfield, Michigan. And what we do at GPS Solutions is we provide turnaround services, as you stated, also developing MTSS, multi-tier systems of support in different school districts that have achievement gaps. I've been an educator now. This is my 32nd year.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I know. It was my anniversary last weekend. 32 years in education, and I've served as a teacher for over half of that time before I moved into Title I services, then administration. So I have served the gamut. I was principal for over 5 years, superintendent, and chief academic officer. So as a matter of fact, in my current role, I also still do a lot of those same roles. It's just named something different. But in education, there's nothing different under the sun. But yes, that's my background. I have 3 daughters, 25, 24, and 5. My husband is one of Detroit's finest police officers. He's an investigator for the Detroit Police Department. So we are definitely delved into our community because we live and we work in the community that we serve. So that's who I am personally and professionally, inside out.
Wow, thank you. That's quite a bit. That could be a show in itself, just covering those 32 years.
Amen.
But luckily, we're limited to 45 minutes, so that's going to be episodes 3, 4, and 5. We'll come back and get those. We'll take
Got it.
we'll take it 11 years at a time.
That's right.
All right, all right. So moving on to our next question, share with us what is your why for doing this work?
Well, my why, as I stated, I've always, my parents were educators. Um, and I grew up amongst a family of educators. I have about 12 people in my family before me who paved that pathway. So it was a natural matriculation for me to go into education. I have always went to school in neighborhood schools here in Detroit. So I know the disparities that we experience as students in Detroit. I went to Detroit Public Schools. I used to go and visit other school districts and surrounding areas, and it was clear the gaps that we experienced as students and the things that we didn't get in comparison to our counterparts. So when I went into education, I said, everything I'm going to learn, I'm going to go out into the suburbs and I'm going to learn and see what they are doing out there. And I'm going to bring it back to my students. And that's how, that was my why. That was my why from day one when I was 19 years old. I said, I'm going to learn what they're getting, and my kids will have the very same opportunities that they have in surrounding areas. So that is definitely how I came into education, with the foresight to, just make sure that our kids had the same opportunities so we could be competitors.
So you mean you didn't come into it for money or summers off?
Summers off, money.
But no,
Money, I have to tell you, and the blessing, Mr. Fisher,
mm,
is you know education is a thankless job. Many, you know for much for a good part of it. The thanks comes in the end when you start seeing, students who are successful, who are servicing the community, who come back and bring back things that you poured into them initially. So money has never, I've always been blessed, never had a need. I don't know how that happened that way. But I think that when you pour in, you naturally get it back in other ways. So definitely not for those things, but to see our kids, just be great leaders. That's what I get out of it.
thank you. And to my audience, surely I jest, but there's a little bit of truth in what I say because a lot
Mhm.
of non-educators' perception is that that's why we go into the field.
That's right.
But Mrs. Caldwell's opening statements about equity and specifically measurable equities of outcome is really why we do it.
That's
So
right.
thank you. So if I can bring it back to that main point, you did it to make a change, a measurable change in your students' lives. All right.
Absolutely.
Because you,
Absolutely.
yeah, if I understand right, you saw no real reason why they shouldn't have the same lives that someone else right across 8 Mile. For you all, we're in Michigan area. 8 miles of a barrier and a separation between more affluent and less affluent students.
That's right. Absolutely. And Mr. Fisher, we always, the good thing about DPS is that they did partner with other school districts, so we can do spelling bees and different activities and competitions. So we were able to see what was beyond our 8 mile scope. And when you start seeing, some of you walk into some school buildings and you like, my goodness, what's going on here? This is a school. I said, there's no reason. There's no, because aesthetics are important. Your learning environment is important.
Absolutely.
And many people say, you're not there for the looks of the building. Sometimes that's what creates, inspiration for kids. When you have clean, safe, beautiful environment, you have a different mindset coming in for learning. So it does make a difference. So I said, okay, I'm going, you know what? When I move beyond my classroom, it's going to be beautiful. When I move beyond the classroom, my building is going to be beautiful. And if I get beyond that, my school district is going to be okay, because that's important.
Absolutely. Thank you. So
Mhm.
along those same lines of answers, I want to kind of just press you in your area of expertise.
Okay.
So thinking about turnaround work, because you initially laid out opportunity gaps and differences in geographical differences of schools.
Okay.
So as we're moving away from what we define as things that are more conducive to success, how do we turn around and start chasing this success instead of going away from it? And before you answer that question, let me be more specific
Okay.
for my audience. How do you define turnaround work? What is it?
Okay. So, Mr. Fisher, I kind of struggle with turnaround. And though my title was originally a turnaround specialist, As you begin to do the work, you know that you are not turning around a thing. Actually, what you are doing is you are either creating something new to bring to the space, you are developing programs to incorporate into what's already happening. You're not turning the school district around, you're plugging in gaps. So, what I like to say is, opposed to turnaround, we are impact leaders. And by that, I mean, we come into school districts, we consult. What's important is that you develop positive relationships across the board, starting with school leaders, because you have to have that trust in order for them to invite you in and feel safe to take your recommendations and suggestions for how you can make your programs even better. So, when I think turnaround, I think of days in the 80s, in the early 90s, when people would come into your school and say, everything you're doing is wrong. And how dare you? You understand what I mean? People don't know what resources people have to work with. They don't know the hindrances that come from school boards or from superintendents. You just have no idea. So how dare you come in with such an attitude that you have the answer to it all? Because if there's anybody who had the answers for everything, then we wouldn't have the problems that we have today. So when
Absolutely.
I think of turnaround, I think of coming in, working with school leaders, working with teachers, working with families, working with school boards, the community stakeholders, and finding out where are the gaps and how can we plug those gaps with best practices or people who have enough experience to be able to drive your academics where you need them to be by the end of the school year. So that would be my definition of what turnaround used to be. We are now impact leaders. We are now people who come in to fill achievement gaps.
Okay. Well, so I agree. Very robust and detailed, comprehensive answer. I appreciate it.
Hmm.
For the rest of this interview, I may still use the word turnaround because
Absolutely.
that's how it's written in my notes. But
That's
for
okay.
interviews
That's
too,
okay.
but for our follow up interviews, I'll look at changing things to impact leader as I'm looking at it in my notes.
My
So
apologies.
just
I
kind of,
didn't mean to change the title.
that's all right. You're a change agent. It's all good. You came to move us forward. We can't go backwards. It's fine.
Right.
If I left this interview unchanged, some would be wrong. So you already did your job. You fixed me, so we're good.
You are funny.
I try to be. All right, so let's go ahead and move along.
Okay.
For people that may be interested in, one, your services, but also just knowing more about the concept.
Hmm.
This is a two-part question, so
Okay.
listen really closely. How do you define private education consulting, and how is it different from public school administration, or how is it different from being a school administrator?
Okay. I'm gonna tell you the truth, Mr. Mr. Fisher. I take my hat off to instructional leaders. I take my hat off to district administrators, public and or private, because the difference is we are coming in to specialize in very specific areas, whether it be coaching for leadership, coaching for teachers, coming in to do academic intervention, doing a specific job scope in order to fill achievement gaps. Whereas with administrators, you are responsible for everything under the sun, everything under that building, everything on that district campus, you are responsible for it. So when you are bringing in specialists to come and fill some of your gaps, that's just one part of, 100-fold as it relates to being an instructional leader or district administrator. So, with district administrators, they're looking at the budget. They're looking at the instructional program. They still have to handle operations. They have to handle the whole gamut. So they are definitely blessings to come in and to provide that leadership. But I have to tell you that we are only a small part of what they do, a very
Hmm.
small part.
Thank you. So if I was to give my definition of what I heard from my audience, private consultants have a very narrow scope, a targeted focus.
Absolutely.
Okay. So they're coming in doing a needs assessment, finding out where the gaps are, identifying those for potential instructional leaders, and identifying a specific area which they're going to attack.
That's exactly it. That's
Okay, great.
exactly it. And as a personal consultant, we try to really maintain within our scope of work so we can really hit the markers or the benchmarks that we set forth as far as showing that we are successful in those areas and not to hinder anything else that's going on around that piece of consulting that you're coming in to do, so it doesn't hinder what the school leader already has in place in other areas. You are
Hmm.
coming to complement and supplement whatever they have going on.
Okay. And see, you've been out of classroom almost 20 years, but you still got it. You taught me. See, I was able to,
Listen.
that was your instruction. I was able to parrot it back to you exactly because of your instruction.
Well, thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
haven't been
perfect.
out the
See,
classroom. Has it been 20 years? Wait, hold on 1 second.
it's approaching.
It's very close.
It's close. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't marry a math teacher for nothing.
I was a math teacher too.
See?
That's all.
Oh, see, there you go. See? All right. So I got a little bit. There you go. So see, you're good at
Yes.
what you do. You taught me math and English. You should have got duly certified. See? Yep. All right. So let's go ahead and keep moving because I want to keep you on your timeline.
Okay.
Um, what do you consider the greatest barrier to supporting school districts in your line of work?
In my line of work, and I think across education, and please feel free to tell me if I'm wrong. The biggest barrier in education now is this teacher shortage,
Mhm.
certified teacher shortage. So we are contending with a threefold issue as it relates to teacher shortages. We have many teachers who are certified, but they are seasoned, retiring, and leaving the field. We have another group of teachers who may have come into teaching and said, you know what, maybe this is not for me. And then they go and they start a second career. But then we have teachers who have come into the field from other career choices, Teach for Americas and, being on those type of different tracks. So starting in another area altogether and then doing a shortened version of teacher education and then going into the classrooms. So I take my hat off to all facets that I just discussed, but I have to tell you that it's a challenge. And the challenges that it poses is that, our experienced teachers are the foundation. They are the foundation, and we need to keep them in place because they mentor incoming teachers. And that mentorship is important, Sean. I think that you can agree with me that mentorship from teachers who have been in our space is very, very, very important as we start developing teachers coming in. But then you have teachers who start in different areas, whether it be business or some other philanthropy um, type areas, and they don't necessarily have the foundational pieces because their track is shortened. Many programs offer the opportunity, say, hey, leave where you are, come and be a teacher. It'll only take 2 months. Where teachers like us or educators like us had to go through a 4-year program, had to do student teaching and all of those to get that experience and to get that mentorship to have a viable classroom. So you are cutting out a hugely important area, but we need teachers. So I think that one of the main barriers and challenges is how we are getting teachers into the field, how we are keeping them and retaining them, and also setting up opportunities for true mentorship with educators who are lifetime educators, not just teaching as a job. That's my opinion.
No, thank you. And let me press you a little bit further. I want to drill down. So,
Mhm.
in your line of work as a not professional, private education consultant,
Mhm.
if I'm a superintendent and I'm looking at bringing you into my district,
Mhm.
what are some things I could do as far as removing barriers so that you could be more successful in my district? So, generally, when you're coming in to do your work, what
Mhm.
barriers do you experience?
Um, some of the barriers that we experience when we are invited to participate in someone's educational program is being able to run programs with fidelity. And let me just give you an example of what I'm talking about, Mr. Fisher. So, if we have academic intervention that we're coming in to coordinate, we're taking a look at the students' gaps. We know that you have some technology-based programs. You have given us the opportunity to sit in and support scheduling so we can make sure that our academic interventionists are in place consistently. As a superintendent or as a building leader, what would really help private consultants such as myself who come in to do this coordination would be to make sure that that time is sacred for intervention. So, because we have teacher shortages, many of our academic interventionists, if they don't come with us, if we are utilizing the current staff because we want to build sustainable systems and use current staff whenever possible, um, they can't be pulled to sub. They can't be pulled to do bus duty and lunch duty and things of that nature. They need to be in front of children. So, as leaders, as instructional leaders, when we come in to partner and to do a specific service, if we could when we run our programs with fidelity, that's when we really see the success, by the end of the school year. So, that is definitely how programs can be best supported by leadership at the top.
So basically, stick to the agreed upon plan.
That's it.
Okay, there you go. Even simple enough for me to understand. All right, perfect.
Yep.
All right, thank you. So,
Mm-hmm.
superintendents and building leaders who are listening out there, if you contract a private consultant, specifically if you get Mrs. Caldwell,
Mm-hmm.
definitely stick to the plan. Make sure that time is sacred because that's how we're going to move our scholars ahead. You know, that's the
Absolutely.
that's the whole reason for everything, their academic growth. So make sure that time is sacred.
That's right. Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. Now,
Hmm.
you are, even in this capacity, even in private education, you are a leader. So I want to ask you a few leadership questions.
Okay.
How do you effectively prepare your staff for turnaround work? So they're going into these buildings and they're helping support. How do you prepare them?
Uh, First, Sean, I would like for you to refer to me as Tareia for the remainder of the interview.
Here we go. All right. I will,
um,
Taria, from now on.
so I have to tell you that that's an important step for me right there because it's about relationship building first. When I work with my staff, when I hire new staff, we bring our staff in. And especially if they work for GPS Solutions, we also do bring in private contractors to do some of the work, as you know. But when I'm hiring GPS Solutions employees, we come in and we start off with restorative practices. We start off with it's not the pedagogy. We have to start with the person first. When I tell you that this turnaround work or this impact work is is it can be very taxing, social emotionally. I have to prepare my staff for what we walk into when we go into buildings every single day, Mr. Fisher. We have buildings who are, sometimes not optimal. I don't want to say sick. I want to say not optimal. So they have a lot of issues. They have a lot of gaps. Sometimes it's because of decisions that were not proper decisions. Sometimes it's because they lacked resources or they lacked people. So you have sometimes us being invited in, for example, by a superintendent, but not invited in by a school leader, by the principal. So you have to make sure that they are equipped to go in and be intentional with building relationships, building trust, because, it's a shame factor. And we don't come in with any, pointing any fingers because you don't know the situation. You don't know the circumstance for each individual school. So preparing them social emotionally, because sometimes people aren't nice and not inviting in the space. Teaching them to go in and build those positive relationships restoratively. Then we can get to the pedagogy. How do we impact the lives of teachers and of students so we can see the growth and see that proficiency level grow in that school year before we leave the doors at the end of the school year? So definitely, like I said, starting with the social emotional and then leading into the pedagogy. That is very, very, very important in that order, in my opinion. And that's what's been making us most successful in the areas that we service.
Perfect. Thank you for the
Mhm,
detailed answer. So
mhm.
it's clear from that last answer that you are for sure a visionary.
Yes,
Yep,
I
definitely. So,
am. I'm gonna
I know it.
own that.
Hey, I mean, you have to. I said it's true. Definitely. I can tell. We're 20 some minutes into the interview, and I can already tell that. So I know. So let me ask you this question. Talking about your vision, if you come in and you and your team are successful at your job,
Mhm.
what do we see? And then also, um, pre-storyboarding that success, how do you communicate to your staff what your vision is? So part one of the question is,
Okay.
what does it look like if you get it right?
Mhm.
And two, how do you communicate that to your staff
Okay.
beforehand so they know what they're working towards?
Absolutely. That's a very good question.
Kind of like
So,
backwards design. We're planning backwards, more or
that's
less.
absolutely, see, you took my answer. That's exactly where I was going. That's exactly where I was going. We always start with the end in mind. And what we have to do is we come in and we goal set together as a team. And when I say that I bring my team in to goal set, it's not just us personally, but I invite school leaders into our circle. Whoever we're working with, we have to be on the same accord as it relates to our goals. So we start off with goals in mind. We talk about what we have in front of us with our needs analysis, and that's what leads us into the actual implementation of what our vision as a team is for the school year. So once we have our scopes of work, we have our clear lines of what the needs are and how we're going to attack those. Doing it with fidelity is how one way that we know that we're headed in the right direction. But those test results are important, Mr. Fisher. So not only we did start off just looking at growth as student growth, because we came in the intervention space of the multi-tier system of support. So we were doing RTI, the RTI portion. But when we branched out into the MTSS portion, we said not only is growth important, but that state test that shows proficiency is most important, because that's our ultimate goal, is to make sure that students are proficient and beyond so they can be competitors in this society. So looking at test results, looking if we are able to run our programs with fidelity, looking that our customer is engaging with our team as a family unit and not as a separate entity, is another way that I determine that we're doing the job that we're supposed to do. So those are three ways that we determine or assess if our program is actually viable and if it's successful by the end of the school year.
Perfect. So it sounds like your vision and your accountability are both data driven.
That's right.
Okay, perfect. So
Absolutely.
you engage in that early on comprehensive needs assessment, and then you assign your work streams based on those needs as you see them. And
That's
it
right.
sounds like if I'm going back to your earlier, some of your earlier answers about hiring the right person, you look at that data first and then hire a person who can do that specific job.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know that we have many teachers who come in and they apply for instructional coaching positions. But as you know, some teachers are good at teaching students, but not good at teaching adults. So my goal is as the director of impact is to make sure that I am pairing each person that come through the doors of GPS Solutions in my unit with their area of strength. And if that means that you are better with working with kids, let's get you with kids. If you can really teach adults how to be better teachers for kids, then come into the instructional coaching space. That's very important. That's very important to the viability of our program.
Thank you.
Hmm.
And also, just going back looking at my notes, I think it is very important how you highlighted the difference between growth versus proficiency.
Hmm.
I feel very often we focus a lot on growth because some of the students that we inherit, some of our scholars are very far behind. So we're like, they can't be proficient,
Right.
but they
They
can,
can. That's
yeah,
right.
yeah. And I like to believe that if you target proficiency, you'll capture growth by default. It's a
Right.
byproduct, right? You can't get to proficiency. If a student's not proficient, they have to grow to get to proficiency. So if
Right.
you just, if you target the end goal in mind of proficiency, you'll get the growth.
Absolutely. And, and I can also say it the other way too. They go hand in hand. Kids have to grow to get to proficiency.
Mhm.
And that's pretty much what you said in the opposite direction. They go hand in hand. And I think that many school districts they get into a cycle of intervention, 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 stay in that cycle too long. You target that and you target it with fidelity and you just drive it home, but you set a goal and say, we're going to do this for this group of kids for 10 weeks. And they should be able to go back in that classroom and be able to perform the way they should perform. If you are doing the program the way it should be done. So I don't think that it really takes intervention, 2 or 3 years, because you'll still remain in a cycle if a child is 2 or 3 years behind. They'll always be doing below grade level assignments if you are not careful to simultaneously still drive that tier one instruction the way it's supposed to be done in that tier one space, but fill in a little bit with those interventions along the way. So you're doing it together and they're coming up together, opposed to just focusing on this one while this one stays here, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And there's two things that I'll lift up as well. Just thinking about my days as a principal.
Hmm.
Um, Anytime I put a student into an intervention, we always sign, I emphasize to my specialists, you create an entry point and an exit point. There has to be that accountability piece. This is not perpetual.
That's right.
Also, our teachers that are caught up in the cycle of intervention teaching, they lose their skills as well. If
That's
you're a
right.
sixth grade ELA teacher and you're always teaching second grade and third grade ELA materials,
That's
you
right.
lose your proficiency. So, you know, we definitely want to keep everybody at grade level or above, right?
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's just, that's been my observation. So I stand in agreement with you, definitely. Those things you highlighted were phenomenal.
Thank you.
So thinking about what you just said with RTI, kind of taking me back a little bit there.
Hmm.
I think I already know the answer to this question, but I'm going to pose it anyway for our listeners, or viewers rather. Do you believe in the power of MTSS?
I am a director of impact services. I do.
Okay, there we go. I thought I already knew the answer, but just in case, no, I figure
Absolutely, I do.
I thought I was stepping out on firm ground there, but
I really think that that whoever came up with a multi-tier system of support was very smart. We did RTI for a number of years when we started doing those interventions a number of years ago, and RTI is great. Tiers 2, tier 3, great, but the most important piece is to get that teacher involved in that support, not just the teacher, but the community, the academic community involved to wrap around students in every direction, whether it be social emotionally, academically, it's the whole supporting the entire student. And I think that we do experience so many gaps, particularly in our urban schools, um, that come from places, and many times they don't have two-parent households, or you have working parents where they're working while students are at school, so they're not at home to be able to support some of those things. So wrapping around a student is imperative to not only their growth, but their development and their ultimate achievement. I know that as a child myself, coming from DPS, and I said that my parents were educators, but they were working class parents. So if I didn't have after school programs, if I didn't have uh, nurses that are bringing the eyeglass folks into the school district so I can get my eyes checked, my parents were working while I was in school. So wraparound services are imperative. Not only I live and breathe wraparound services as it relates to MTSS, supporting that student in multiple ways and just wrapping around them. Absolutely, I do. And I do believe in the portion that we come in when we talk academic intervention in that tier 2 space. Because everyone knows that, that students have gaps, particularly now with COVID. You talking about having gaps? That gap has widened with students having to transition to platforms that they've never had to work on before. So if we don't have MTSS, I absolutely don't know where education would be. To be quite honest, today, tomorrow, and in the future, until we can really catch up, if there's such a thing.
Thank you. That was a very detailed answer, very helpful.
Hmm.
However, in answering that question, you created another question.
Oh, okay.
So, putting on our teacher hat, right? We want to do vocabulary building. So,
Right.
for those educators that don't have a firm understanding or understanding at all of the term wraparound services, you want to bring that to the forefront for us, highlight your interpretation of it?
Absolutely. So wraparound services is, as a district leader or as a building leader, what services can I bring into my school to be able to support my students and support my families? So wraparound services are brought in and developed, created in order to make sure that students who have needs met on the school level. So whether it be eyeglasses, whether it be having the dentist come into the schools to clean, for annual or semi-annual cleanings for students. If you have parents who need to have internet service in order for them to find jobs, whatever we can do to pour back into the community to help parents and help families and help students be successful. That's what wraparound services are for leaders like yourself and me. For our kiddos, just, what can we do to make you better? What can we do to fill in gaps and to help our parents out because they're out there working? But you don't have to suffer because they're working. It's supposed to be something that they are um, bringing to help you to be successful as well. So just partnering with families and making sure that kids have everything they need to be successful. That's my definition of wraparound services. Please add.
Yep. No, thank you so much. And thank you for giving specific examples because I was just about to
Mhm.
press you because you're so, high level up here. So we had to get you to come down to ground level and give us like what could we do? So
Right.
now teachers understand their role in wraparound services. if you see a student thinking about universal design for learning, if you see a kid squinting, you know, go to school social worker or counselor and say, hey, I think this kid might need glasses.
That's
Now
right.
you're part of the wraparound process. So thank you for drilling down there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I really, forgive me, because social workers are a huge piece of wraparound services, because they are the coordinators many times. We use our social workers as counselors and things of that nature, but really they were designed to come in and coordinate these services based on what teachers need, because they are boots on the ground, and they are the first people who children see every day, and who can really know the needs. So absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, social workers. Today is Social Worker Day, by the way.
I did not know that. Wow, thank you.
Yes.
You social workers are the best. Oh my, I'm gonna find a social worker and thank him or her.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So this is bringing us to the end of our interview. I'm going to ask you a two-part question.
Okay.
So the first part is feel free to share any advice or information that you think the general public of education or general field of education can utilize. And then I want you to give us specific contact information. So if a superintendent, central office administrator, building administrator, teacher leader who's watching this video wants to reach out to your company or reach out to you for
Mm-hmm.
services, how can they contact you?
All right. Um, so for school districts who are experiencing low test scores, or who are experiencing a high influx of teachers who are not necessarily certified or who are new to the field, I say reach out to consultants like us. Not only are we coming in to do a very specific service as it relates to students, but we also do instructional coaching for teachers. And we know as leaders that our teachers are tiered for our support needs are concerned. You may have seasoned teachers who may need a little refreshing, with some best practices and some ideas, some thought partners. But we also have new teachers or teachers who are not certified who need guidance, who actually need guidance. And as an instructional leader, because many times we're stretched all the way across our buildings in every different avenue, some teachers can slip through the cracks. So when we come in to partner with you to do a solid needs analysis, and we get in with teachers where they are and be able to really help them to grow your students. If and with no shame factor. Please, that's the most important piece that I really want to emphasize today, Mr. Fisher, if I could. Many buildings think, consultants cost too much. Please put the value on your students. If you have someone who specializes in being able to increase test scores for your students, or be able to offer a service that you need in order to fill gaps, please put the value on the kids, not on the service. Many school districts try to do it from within, and that's great if you have the manpower to be able to do that. But what we really see from the outside as consultants, former leaders ourselves, is that you can really spread people too thin, where they don't do anything well. They'll do average across the board. So I say reach out to consultants like Mr. Fisher, like Tareia Caldwell from GPS Solutions, and really grab onto our expertise, because we've served in the gamut, and we can really focus where you need us to focus, so you can focus on the other important things that are going on in your school district. Um, as I stated, my name is Tareia Caldwell. I am the Director of Impact Services for GPS Solutions, located in Southfield, 29777 Telegraph Road in Southfield, Michigan. We're located in the Onyx building right across from the Meyer on Telegraph. That's our new location, by the way, Mr. Fisher. I know you're thinking like, our telephone
I
number.
was thinking that. Yeah.
Our telephone number is 313-421-3551. Again, that's 313-421-3551. And my email address is t.caldwell, Caldwell, at gpssolutions.us. No spaces. So that's how you can reach me with GPS Solutions, and we offer leadership coaching, instructional coaching, academic intervention. We do level 5 services as far as operations are concerned for teacher retention, HR, operations, and things of that nature as well. So please reach out to us, and remember, everything does have a cost. But when you reach out to businesses, such educational services, not businesses, educational services, servant leaders like myself, like Mr. Fisher, you will get double the work for whatever you put out there as far as far as monies are concerned, guaranteed.
Absolutely. So that
Mhm.
is a perfect point to conclude the interview. I don't think I could have said it better myself. I know I couldn't. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yep. So to our audience, those that are just joining us, let me just recap. Our special guest today was Mrs. Tareia Caldwell, and she's
Mhm.
a turnaround specialist, a turnaround leader, also a specialist in the field of private consulting.
Mhm.
And we had her in today to highlight and clearly define the impact of private consulting on your ability to provide education, effective education, metric moving education for your scholars.
Absolutely.
Yep. For those of you that don't know me by now, my name is Sean Fisher. I'm the proud CEO and owner of the Fisher Educational Consulting Group, and
Mhm.
also the leader and host of the Fisher Educational Consulting Group TV channel. Um, we'd like to thank you all for joining us, and we hope that you come back and see us again next week when we have our next guest on. Everyone, thank you, and be safe and enjoy Mother's Day.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell.